One of the most interesting deals in media over the past week or so was Dax Shepard and the Armchair Expert group of podcasts signing with Wondery, which is part of Amazon, and leaving their exclusive deal on Spotify. Now, there's a lot going on there. Armchair Expert is not actually leaving Spotify as a podcast, but it is going to move to Wondery. There's going to be some early access available for subscribers there. And also Wondery is going to handle their advertising. So that's really what this $80 million check is for being the exclusive advertising location for the Armchair Expert podcast. This is actually very similar to the deal that Spotify signed with Joe Rogan, I believe it was earlier this year. No longer exclusive to Spotify, so distribution is going to be going to all kinds of other podcast players, but those advertisements are going to be handled by Spotify. So I want to dig into this deal, some of the peculiarities about it, and why Amazon is trying to get into this business. Because one of the reasons I'm very bullish on Spotify is that this has become the biggest streaming service in music, and if they can translate that from music to audiobooks and to podcasts, they're going to build scale in a business that is ultimately going to be monetized more and more by advertising. And podcasts are a big part of those advertisements. So Amazon is at least trying to take a little piece of that. But I don't know that they actually have the scale to do that versus Spotify. But let's get into the numbers when it comes to music and podcasts. My name is Travis Hoyam. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. If you go to fool.com/ASYM, they'll give you their top 10 stocks to buy right now. First of all, I want to go through exactly what Wondery is, because this is not a service that I have ever used before, and actually even heard of before last week. So Wondery was actually technically a major independent podcast network that was acquired by Amazon in 2020, late in 2020. The deal was reportedly worth about $300 million, although Amazon is big enough that they're not going to report the details of a deal like that because it's just small enough that it doesn't really matter. And even at that time, this was nearly 4 years ago, the idea was that they were going to help compete with Spotify. So Wondery in the podcast business, you have Amazon Music in the music business. They really wanted to take on Spotify and extend their dominant position into both music and podcasts. That's the idea starting in 2020. That extends to this deal with Dax Shepard and the Armchair Expert podcast. $80 million is what's being reported. And that's going to be not only for Armchair Expert, but also reportedly a couple of other podcasts that are going to be in the works as well. Now, users will be able to get Armchair Expert a week early if they have a Wondery Plus subscription. But like I said, these podcasts are going to be distributed everywhere. So this is not really an exclusive. The reason I think this is so interesting is because Wondery falls under Amazon Music, and Amazon Music is not all that big of a service. About 53 million users. This is according to Statista. I have seen reports that there's around 80 or 85 million users worldwide. But this is the base of users that's not only in music, but also in podcasts. So if you're Amazon and you're trying to build out an advertising business for the audio segment, which is what this would be leaning into, that's the user base that you're going to be serving ads to, is about that 80 million users. So the idea here is you're acquiring a podcast that has a much wider distribution on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on every other podcast player, and you're going to be able to insert those ads. Now compare that to Spotify's strategy, where they're saying we're going to be serving ads and have premium memberships for now hundreds of millions of users. You can see that even when the Wondery acquisition happened, there were 354 million users on Spotify, both ad-supported and paying. Now there are 627 million users. So this business has scaled to nearly 10 times the size of what Amazon Music is today. And that's the advertising platform. The critical thing with advertising is if you're going to build an advertising platform, you need to have scale from a user perspective so that the advertising tools that you're building are able to reach the most people. If you're going to develop an ad and say, hey, I want to target a certain kind of person in a certain city that has certain spending patterns. If you have 1 billion users, that's going to be much more effective to target to those users than if you have 10 million users. This is why social media has really gone to Facebook. They have the most scale. They're able to not only leverage the most users on their platform compared to Reddit, Snapchat, all kinds of other social media apps, they also generate more revenue per user. That's why they can have many multiples, an order of magnitude more revenue than their competitors and be much, much more profitable as a result, because those benefits to scale compound on themselves in the advertising business. And so that's exactly what I think we're seeing here. Amazon's at least saying, you know what, we need to stay in this business because we're trying to build this advertising business that's tied to their retail platform. The more extensions that they can have into that retail platform, the better it's going to be. But Spotify is going after that exact same segment. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the advertising business, at least, away from one of the bigger names in podcasting, and that is the Dax Shepard and Armchair Expert podcasts. The problem is that costs $80 million for them to do that. So I don't know if there's going to be enough value in that for them. All of this said, Spotify has not actually been able to make the advertising business as big as they would like. And I think ultimately this is where the upside is for the company, but it hasn't actually come to fruition yet. So let's go through some of those numbers. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. This is a look at Spotify's ad-supported revenue in green. You can see that a nice compound annual growth rate of 30%, but only a $1.7 billion business, and has not been particularly profitable. Gross profit over the past year was just $97 million, and this is fluctuated from a slight profit to a slight decline. Now, I think the hope for investors and for Spotify over the next couple of years is that those margins continue to go up as there's more scale in the business, as they focus on targeting their advertising a little bit better. I know I'm seeing more localized advertising. So if they can build out that platform, like I mentioned, if you're looking to do audio advertising, are you going to look at Spotify first, or are you going to look at Amazon first? Well, theoretically, you would look at Spotify first because they would have maybe better tools, but they would definitely have a much larger audience to reach. Now, Amazon is able to leverage the audience that they have and the advertisers that they have with their merchants on their traditional retail platform. So maybe there's a way that they can play that and generate a little better margins there. But that's really the idea behind building the advertising business on Spotify. But like I said, not a particularly profitable business right now, and the user numbers, the amount of revenue that they generate per user, is pretty weak, just $4.49 per user per year from the ad-supported business. So it's much better from an economic perspective for Spotify to be moving users and music listeners in particular to their premium business, which is going to be $10, $12, $15 a month, depending on which plan you choose. So put all of these things together, and I think what we're seeing is a real fight for the future of audio advertising. And Spotify, I think, has really staked out a surprising claim as the biggest place for not only music, but also podcasts. And Amazon is at least coming after a little bit of that. Now, we'll see if that's successful over the next few years. I think it was a little bit crazy to see the price tag that they're paying for the Armchair Expert podcast, and then the fact that they're not going to be exclusive. So yes, you're going to be hearing basically Amazon ads if you're listening to the Armchair Expert podcast on Spotify, but you're still going to be able to get it on Spotify. You're still going to be on Spotify's platform. They're going to get the data that is going to make their advertising platform more targeted, more direct. I don't think that's something that Amazon is going to be able to steal away with Amazon Music and Wondery. And so that's really where I question the strategy for them. But if this is not successful and Spotify continues to grow, it will show just how powerful Spotify's position has become in the audio business. Now, I do want to see that advertising business start to be a little bit more effective, start to grow more quickly, start to generate better margins. I think that we're going to hear more and more about that on conference calls over the next couple of years, because that needs to be the next leg of monetization. If they're going to move more into audiobooks and podcasts in particular, the way to monetize those is going to be with advertising, not with premium subscriptions the way that it was with music. And if they're able to build the best advertising platform, then that will end up being the best place for creators to put their content. And then you start creating those network effects for both audiobooks and podcasts, the way that and you could potentially have better margins and a more sticky business than you do with music. This would be similar to YouTube. If you're a creator, YouTube has the best audience, they have the best monetization tools. So if you want to put videos out in the world, YouTube is going to be the best place to do that, the most cost-effective place to do that, and the best place to monetize your content. Spotify wants to play that role in audio. So that's the way to look at this, and that's what I was so surprised that Wondery and Amazon is writing such a big check to Dax Shepard and the Armchair Expert. But what do you think Leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.